All right, people, live and with a guest. Haven't had you on in a while, mate. Haven't had you on in a while. Before we kick into what we're going to talk about, I think people know. Want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, mate. Thanks for having me again. Like you say, it feels like it's been a while. Can't remember the
It feels
last time,
ages.
but feels good to be back on your channel as always. I'm Jamie from Punch Perfect Boxing. Anyone that wants to head over, do a lot of similar stuff to Gman, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
predictions, a lot of breakdowns, and try to cover the aspects of the sport that don't get enough coverage as well, like the lower weight classes, boxing in Asia, and also amateur boxing as well. So come on over.
Thanks to Jamie, I know a good bit more about amateur boxing as well.
Appreciate it.
Covers the scene like none, like none. In terms of the channel, Punch Perfect Boxing, I have it linked in the main comments. Obviously, I'm going to put a link to it in the comment section once we finish. I'm going to pin that as well.
Nice one.
So you just pass 5K. So the
Yep.
goal is I'm trying to get to 10K by the end of the year. I'm into the 200s now to get to that. So I know the feeling. I know the feeling when I hit 5K, 10K was the next block, and it just once you get inside it is, it just feels like come on, just please,
Yeah.
just flip and come over, just do it. Like that's how it feels. So I look at
Yeah.
that now and I see like it's like 9,700, I think 18. I'm just like, come on, for God's sake, just please, just get this over and done with.
Yeah, and then YouTube starts being annoying and does its cleanup, and you lose like 50
Yes,
subscribers at one go, and then you got to retry again.
yes.
It's like,
And
oh,
then
pain
and
in the
then you're
ass.
just kind of like, God damn it. And you're like,
Yeah,
well, at least I know it's not me. At least I know it's not
exactly.
me. It's just YouTube being its usual helpful self. Where would he be without it?
Exactly.
Obviously, we got to kick things off with the main talking points from last weekend. I don't even know where to start because it seems like Tyson Fury is just he's given us all more ammunition. And prior to what people think, I don't enjoy going after Fury, but God, he gives us so much ammo. So he fought Dereck Chisora, a complete mismatch on pay per view, which was dearer, apparently with an injury that he's going to now need 6 to 8 weeks to recover from. So that means the USEC fight happening in February or March is pretty much no chance. And you would imagine he would have known that going into this fight. So what was the point in this fight?
There was no point. There was no point
This
when
is
it
it.
was announced. There was no point when it was rumored, and there was no point when both of them were making their way to the ring. And to be honest, I know Derek Chisora is his own man, and I know he will never turn down the payday. And to be honest, as much as everyone wants to see him say goodbye, I think there's still paydays for him to get because ultimately promoters use these fighters; they don't care about them enough. The fact that he was even in the ring with Tyson Fury, who, again, as you said, sometimes we may get criticism as content creators for calling him out on certain things. But the fact of the matter is, he's the number one heavyweight in the world and doesn't belong anywhere near Derek Chisora at this stage. So it was sad to watch it. There were just moments where Fury would land big and then he'd sort of like cuddle
Mm-hmm.
him and grab him up. So it would sort of carry him through the fight. There was a moment as well where Dereck actually held onto the rope at one point to keep himself upright. And that fight went on for about 4 or 5 rounds after that as well. And it's just painful to watch. And the one guy that I thought might have cared about him was Don Charles, and even he didn't seem to give two tosses when it mattered most. So yeah, it was not an enjoyable watch.
No, the whole like I had Love Boxing TV on last week, and they kind of likened this card in the preview to almost a bit like a WWE kind of event. And to be honest, mate, it had that feel. It just kind of what you were watching was just like, what the hell is this? You were just like, it just seems so. I don't think scripted almost is the best way to describe it. It's like, why is this happening? Why is he in there? And why is this in it? It was just none of it made any sense. And I think the fact that if Tyson Fury had done this maybe as a non-title fight over 10 rounds and put it on standard BT, I don't think any of us would be complaining. We might
Yeah.
complain and say, like, why does Chisora need to take another beat and, worry about his own health? But I don't think we would have complained about him having a tune-up in that sense. But to put this on pay-per-view as a world title fight, I mean, I just don't know. And the WBC, one win in his last four fights, and he gets a crack at a world title.
Yeah, well, they conveniently added him in after he beat
Mm-hmm.
Kubrat Pulev, who didn't beat, wasn't in the top 15 with the WBC when Chisora beat him. So it's just like it's them doing a favor for a favor, and it's like, yeah, Derek Chisora doesn't belong anywhere near any top 15 heavyweight at the minute, in my opinion.
Thomas Newman put a good comment in there saying Hearn's now saying he should retire, but a few weeks earlier he was trying to line him up for Wilder. I seen an interview with IFL where Eddie Hearn was saying that it was a like this fight should never have happened, But like after he beat Pulev, the first name he was mentioning was Deontay Wilder. So it really kind of shows where promoters, not just Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn, how they actually see these fighters. If they can make money out of them, they don't give a crap about health.
Yeah, I do a review show on a Sunday with my good friend Jordan, and the thing I always say, I said it when Chris Eubank and Conor Benn were going through that situation as well. These promoters, when a fighter ends up in hospital or even worse, ends up in an even worse state, they love to come out and say fighters are too brave for their own good. You know, fighters will never turn down a payday. Fighters will never do this. It's the promoters ultimately that don't look out for them. Even Frank Warren, a couple of years ago said Dereck Chisora shouldn't be involved in big fights anymore. He put him in with the number one heavyweight in the world. Eddie Hearn wanted to put him in with the most dangerous heavyweight maybe ever, potentially. It's like they don't care enough about these fighters. And I can still see it now. Even despite that, I can still see, Daniel Dubois needs a bit of a confidence builder and a name.
Mm-hmm.
Dereck Chisora could fit the bill for that, even over on Matchroom. Dillian White didn't look great and maybe needs a big name. So they look at Chisora, he just still fits the purpose and he absolutely shouldn't. And it's disgraceful, to be honest. Someone needs to. And I know the British board are pretty bad on most things. The one thing they're good at is fighter health. Their medical care and everything is exceptional. I know that something may not come up in the scans and stuff that they do that makes you able to ban him, and I know there's other ways because he's got licenses elsewhere before, but something like that maybe makes him go, do you know what, this isn't as much effort as it's worth now.
I think he's hinted that he's going to carry on, but I think he should just, if he wants to get a win, I don't mind him going and getting a complete journeyman, a little cabbage to just go in there and knock over it. If he wants to go out and a win, I could understand that. That's fine. But I mean, the fact that he's saying he wants to fight again, these promoters do not give a what. They would gladly put him in. They put him in the firing line again, and I really don't want to see that.
Yeah, and in the past, it feels like, when he's lost fights to top guys and he's kind of gone in the changing room afterwards with a Five Guys burger and he's kind of laughing and joking. I mean, on Saturday, it was a nice touching moment with Tyson Fury, but it was uncomfortable to watch because he was just unresponsive. Tyson was laughing and joking and introducing his family, and Dereck it looked like, someone was there, but the lights weren't on. It was just really, really difficult to watch.
I didn't like watching it at all. You could even hear in his voice, he was struggling to even get a word out. I said, it might be a bit harsh, but feels like Don Charles was keeping him in there for his own hopes of winning a world title as a trainer. Don Charles was in the corner in the second fight, and that was a fresh Chisora. He pulled him out. He had no intention of pulling Chisora out in this fight. I don't know why. I don't know why Chisora keeps going back to him. Don Charles has got to be one of the, in terms of like trainers that we know of, him and Tunde have got to be right up there in terms of some of the worst. I memean, Tunde, fair enough, he actually knows how to get you good technique. Don Charles couldn't teach Dereck how to punch correctly for years. But that whole fight just made no sense. And Victor Loughlin, I feel a bit for Victor Loughlin because he's had a bad time of it, especially 2016. Because you remember Mike Towell, Edward Goodneck, and I think it was Nick Blackwell. They were all fights he refereed. So I kind of felt a bit for him in there because he's been there, seen it and done it with fighters, casualties in boxing. So I kind of felt a bit bad for him. And I guess the fact was he knew, probably deep down, he knew he was in. It's not like stopping it on a small card. He's in a big stadium, 60-odd thousand, and they booed as soon as he stopped it. I'm sure that was probably what he feared most, was just, the fans really turning and causing a riot, because God knows what might happen.
Yeah, and anyone that follows me on Twitter know that I'm probably the leader of the calling out British officials. Everyone says about the standard of judging. I think the standard of refereeing is just as bad. And I know we're going to talk about it with Dubois and what Howard Foster was like in that fight. But I think Victor Loughlin, if you just look at the resume over the last couple of years since 2016, he's been one of the better UK referees. Yeah, he seems to have more 100%. Control of the situation over the last couple of years. And like you say, I think his fear was, if I stop this too early, the crowd are going to boo, Frank's going to be annoyed, even maybe Tyson will be annoyed that he didn't get the knockout or whatever. But I think Dereck Chisora was very complimentary of Victor Loughlin afterwards, because he said he wasn't ever going to quit. It didn't seem like Don Charles was going to pull him out. So I think he was quite grateful to Victor Loughlin, to be honest.
And I think it's good to have a referee who does that. Like, he was pretty much telling the corner going into the 10th round, I'm stopping this. I think he was even asking them, are you stopping it? Expect them to stop it. So, he definitely did it 100%. Of no issue with Victor Loughlin in there at all. In terms of referees that we do have a bit of an issue with, we have to talk about the co-main. Daniel Dubois versus Kevin Lerena. The first question, a lot of people are asking this. You think this fight was fixed?
I don't think it was fixed. I just genuinely think the officiating is dreadful. I mean, I've said it 100 times. UK officials, so many of them look like they're just never in control of a fight. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the referee is referred to as the man in charge. How many times do you watch a fight and genuinely believe that the referee in the UK is in charge of that fight? It looks like he's there predetermined to make a decision if an occurrence happens that is favourable to the A side, and he just seemed to panic. I don't
Oh
think
yeah,
he actually jumped in with the mind to stop Kevin Arena. The bell went, everything was going on. He was getting, but he didn't know what to do, so he just waved it. Again, it's that panic motion that I just
that's a
don't
recurring
get.
theme with Howard Foster. Though we've
Yes,
seen that
happens
through
all
the
the
years.
time.
He's one of the only referees I've ever seen who you can see it in his eyes when a fighter is buzzed. He just doesn't know what to do.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
think that's one of
Steve
the reasons
Steve
why
Gray
we have
does
so
it.
many. I think Steve Gray is a bit more competent, to be fair, than Howard Foster, because Howard Foster, you can really see it in his face. He's just like, what do I do? What do I do? He's hurt. And it's like, well, just see how it goes. No, stop, wave it. And yeah, stopped. And it's almost like he doesn't know what's going on until it's done. Because that was kind of how it seemed after the stoppage. Because when I heard the bell ring and I saw the wave, I thought, is he waving it to end, as in the round's over? And then it's like, oh, the fight's over. And I was kind of like, okay, look, he did look hurt, but I was like, the bell went. Like, you could have at least let him finish the round.
Yeah, that was the thing. Was I actually think the stoppage was probably justified if it was in the
Oh
normal
yeah, yeah.
part, if it was within the time of the round. But because it went past, it was like, no, you should give him a chance to go back to his corner. And Howard Foster is the one that just panics and stops fights.
Mm.
Steve Gray's the one that doesn't actually have any control of the fight and will just do weird stuff in the middle of it where you think, what is he doing? He's got no control of this. So those two really stand. I mean, Ian John Lewis isn't much better either, but
And he's
it's
gone
just
from A-star judging now, or refereeing.
Exactly. And they need to have a look at doing it with more of them because, yeah, they had no control whatsoever. And I know a lot of people have said about the WBA ruling of the 3 knockdown rules and whatever. Again, I think that's the standard of officiating where they're probably not even
Mm-hmm.
aware of having to do that if someone gets knocked down 3 times. Probably didn't even cross his mind. It's like,
No.
it's just, yeah, it's embarrassing.
It's a good question there from Rad. Do you think Dubois has punch resistance problems or by the ruptured knee? Well, if it was really, like they were saying it was ligament. I mean, if it was ligament, he wouldn't be standing. No way. No
Yeah.
way. But punch resistance, I don't know. I think he got hit with a good shot that just scrambled his senses and he panicked. Whether there was an injury there or not, it didn't look to me watching it live that there was. Then maybe there was a little niggle because fighters do have them, but it just looked like he went into panic mode and just didn't know what to do.
Yeah, and I don't think he's got necessarily punch resistance issues. I mean, if you actually look at the Joe Joyce fight, he probably stood up to Joe Joyce's power better than Joseph Parker did, and he handled the
Mm,
pace a little bit better as well. So he's got a decent enough chin. You just see with heavyweights sometimes when you get hit on the top of the head or around the back of the ear. I always think back to David Price against Tony Thompson, that shot behind
yeah.
the ear where his legs just completely went. It was like they didn't work anymore once it hits your nerves and it sends that sort of shoot down. It completely throws you off. Anthony Joshua against Andy Ruiz, I don't think ever
Mm-hmm.
really fully recovered from it happening to him. With these big guys, when you get hit hard in certain parts where you wouldn't think much would happen because it doesn't necessarily look like a clean shot, it just sends you a little bit. And that's why when he went back to the corner, Dubois, I know adrenaline's rushing. He didn't go my ankle, my knee. He went my legs, because he couldn't feel them and he didn't have any sense of balance anymore. And I think even that for him was a little bit like, I don't really know how to respond to this. And Shane did a really good job of like instilling
Mm-hmm.
some confidence and almost making him believe his legs were there. And even in the second round, where after he'd been down 3 times, he was moving about fine. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
moving around. He wasn't like kind of limping, like David Hay against Bellew, where he's like dragging his right leg along.
Yeah,
It
that
looked
was
it looked like he could
bizarre.
barely move. Whereas Daniel Dubois was up fine. He just needed to get some stability again. So I don't particularly buy that he was injured. I think he just got hit with the wrong type of shot.
Do you think that moving forward that will help him? Because I kind of thought after the Joe Joyce fight, I was like, there's always going to be that question mark there. And I'm sure he knows it as well, people saying it to him. The fact that he's come through this crisis and has came through and got the win, surely on a subconscious level, that's got to help him. He's going to be able to say, look, I got through it. It was a crisis. I got through it. I can do it again.
Yeah, I think it would definitely give him more confidence in Shane. You know, if it ever comes to that circumstance again, he'll believe what Shane's telling him. He'll have the
Hmm.
confidence that what his cornerman is saying to him is the correct advice. It can go the other way, where you sometimes always tend to remember the negatives rather than the positives of a performance. And if that is to happen again, potentially against a better opponent, then maybe he just doesn't recover or doesn't have the opportunity to recover. You know, Kevin Arena, after that first round went back to the corner and they went, "Great job, mate. You're much better than him. You hit too hard. You're too good. Just take your time." I mean, another heavyweight might have gone, you know, with a different coach, might have gone, just stick it on him this round and may have got Dubois
Hmm.
out of there. You don't know. So it'd be interesting to see. He's still a young man, Dubois. I feel a little bit sorry for him at times because I think he gets put in the firing line a little bit too
Yeah,
much.
I think
Um,
he's Frank Warren's great hope for
yeah,
the future, and I think Frank Warren puts a lot of pressure on
yeah, and that WBA regular belt, I know we like
him.
to mock the regular belts, but it is a way in the door at heavyweight. And for some
Hmm.
fighters, they do view it as a heavyweight title. And Dubois got a bit of a target on his back now. Maybe they start giving him mandatories, etc., for that regular belt as well, where he gets matched against a top 10 guy who's very good. So Dubois got a bit of a target on his back now that I don't think he's really ready for.
No, neither do I. That's an interesting one there, though. Wadley and Adelia. I think he beats them both personally. I think that seeing how much Wadley struggled with Gorman's jab, I think Dubois' jab is longer, faster, and harder. Well, maybe not faster, but it's longer and it's got a lot more pop on it. I think he'd give him an awful time with that, to be honest with you. And Adelia is just a bit too green, I think.
Oh, he smashed Adelaide to bits.
Yeah,
Adelaide got a lucky decision against Sokolowski.
very lucky.
And Wardley's the thing I like about Fabio Wardley is his response to adversity is, well,
Yeah.
actually, I'm just big and I punch quite hard, so I'm just going to do that instead. And I quite like that. But Dubois big. Dubois punches very hard himself, and Wardley's taken shots early on, but against Molina, against Gorman, he looked like he felt it. I think if you get hit by Dubois, you probably stay hit. So I would pick him over Wardley as well.
100%. In terms of what Dubois does next, obviously he was meant to be fighting Dylan White. That was the original opponent. I'm sure he looked at that fight and thought, crap. If I'd have been in there, I'd have taken his head off. You think for Dylan White, we don't know what's going to happen with AJ because first it's next, then it might not be next. If you're Dylan White, he's not a matchroom fighter per se. He kind of can do what he wants.
Mhm.
Does he just want money, or does he actually want that legacy? If look, I don't count the WBA regular as a title, but a lot of people do, and officially, I think it does mark you down as a champion. You know,
Mhm.
Povetkin only held the regular, but people still say he was heavyweight champion. So officially, it does technically. Do you think he should just say, right, look, I can beat this guy, I can get a title, and maybe then I can have the AJ fight before we can sell it as a world title on pay per view? You know, a calculated risk almost.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what Dillian White's next move is because, I mean, he was a heavy favourite against Jermaine Franklin, and after
Mm,
watching that fight, you're almost skeptical that can he box a level above Jermaine Franklin at this stage. He didn't quite look like he could even do that right now. And the Anthony Joshua fight doesn't fill me with any degree of excitement. I think it's quite one sided at this stage. So they have to be careful with Dillian White just as much as they do with Dubois, to be honest. Because if you want to keep him as one of the guys that in the UK you can headline with and be involved in big fights, you can't put him in with a dangerous heavyweight. You need to be careful. You know, the likes of Coley, Michael Hunter, etc. I don't pick them to beat Dillian White at this stage. So I think they've got to be very careful about how they do match him if you want to put him in big fights
mm-hmm.
in a year or so down the line.
I seen Michael Hunter call out Daniel Dubois actually after that fight, and
Yeah,
I think if Frank Warren was smart, he wouldn't make that fight for Daniel Dubois. I could see
that's a
that going
horrible
very bad
matchup.
for him. I could see that going very, very bad for Daniel Dubois. And Michael Hunter is a fighter I feel a bit sorry for over the last year. He's really been chucked around bad
Mm,
by he was signed with Boxer in the idea that he'd have the Fury fight, and then it was see you later. So I
yeah,
feel a bit for Michael Hunter. A lot of potential in him still.
yeah,
But
100%.
in terms of Dubois, if you were his if you were in his team matchmaker, what route would you go down next? For me, I'd probably still chance the Dylan White fight. I'd be saying, Frank, get the checkbook out.
Yeah, I think you probably go, and again, I want to advocate this for everyone watching. I do not want to see Dereck Chisora fight again, but
No.
I'm thinking from a promoter's mindset and how they think. ultimately, if you want a version of Dillian White that's a guaranteed win rather than, a percentage chance that Dillian White does beat you and knock you out, you take Dereck Chisora because he's a more washed, not as good version of Dillian White at this stage. Maybe even a bigger name than Dillian White, potentially. Chisora's been around longer. He's fought bigger names throughout his career as well. Mixed at the top level for the last couple of years, regardless of how he's got on. So, I mean, that's the type of fight where, for Dubois, he isn't a name yet. He's a little bit behind Joyce. He's obviously a long way off the likes of Chisora, White, AJ Fury, those type of names. So he does need to start bridging that gap commercially. Maybe they look at Dereck Chisora, and I think if I'm just putting on my Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn hat, that's the type of fight that you would see a promoter make for someone in Daniel Dubois' situation at the minute.
Yeah, no, 100%. Do you remember? And I was just thinking of this actually today. I doubt it won't happen, but I wouldn't put it past Frank Warren to do something like this. Dave Allen, remember they tried to make that fight a few years ago?
Yeah,
I would not put it all past them. All of a sudden, he pops up in the WBA rankings. We've just announced pay-per-view, BT Sport. I think it's a great fight. I think it's a good. You can picture Frank Fish eyes. It's a great step up. Yeah, domestic clash world title.
Yeah, you can already picture that a mile off.
He'd have no shame doing that. And Dave Allen, man, great fight. Well, I'm coming to win, with the big friend. I'm coming to win. Yeah, I'm coming to win. The Dave Allen, the most charismatic man in the room.
Yeah.
In terms of what's next for Fury, because we got to talk about Fury Usyk, it's a bit up in the air now. I said at the start, he's apparently got to get surgery done on his elbow. What the hell? So Usyk was the guy ducking because he'd just come through a tough fight with AJ in a tough camp, and he needed some time off. And December date wasn't locked in. He just proposed that date. We're hearing that February, March was kind of, yes, we can do it then. Now it's likely we're not going to get it. I mean, what is going to happen? Is Usyk going to have to go, do you think, and just say, right, IBF, just let's get this out of the way. I'll fight Hrgovic.
Yeah, my gut feel is you get Usyk Hrgovic next, and then whatever happens with Tyson Fury after that. I mean, I think Tyson Fury is going to have one absolutely huge fight next year. I'm just not sure who it will end up being against. I think there's just a plethora of names that it could be. If Usyk gets through Hrgovic. My issue is that all these top heavyweights now, I know Tyson Fury's fought twice this year, but one of them was Dereck Chisora, so you don't necessarily have to count that because he could have beat him, just getting off the couch basically. But you look at all the top heavyweights, Joshua, Usyk, they haven't really been fighting twice a year for a while now. And for you, in Usyk's case, I worry that that's more a little bit about his body. I think the only reason he is doing that is because he needs ample recovery time and he picks up little injuries. If he fights Hrgovic, there's no guarantee that he doesn't get an elbow injury or a shoulder injury that requires him to be out for a couple of months as well. So Usyk Hrgovic is the definite for me next year. I see that happening. And then after that, I think Fury will be in a position where they have a look at Joe Joyce. I think that fight's always been in Frank's mind. I don't think he expected Joe Joyce to be as good as he is. I think he's always kind of had it in mind that he'd get Joyce to a position, then he'd fight Fury, lose, and then that would be that. But he's kind of got Joyce to a position now where he's the most feared sort of heavyweight outside of the champions. So I think Fury Joyce is a possibility. I mean, if Andy Ruiz was to go and beat Deontay Wilder in that WBC final eliminator, I can see Tyson just beating Ruiz to take the piss out of Joshua.
Just to do that.
Yeah, there's all these possibilities with Fury, but I do have confidence in him that we will see Fury next year in at least one massive fight. I think we're going to get a fight that we're really, really happy with.
In terms of Joe Joyce, I was just thinking about that. Look, Joe Joyce is not the quickest heavyweight in the world, but I'd love to see how that pressure, how Fury would deal with that. Because I think Dereck Chisora, if he did one thing, is that he showed people that Fury's punching power is this newfound devastating power. It's not really all that devastating. I mean, Chisora has been hurt. Chisora was hurt worse by Parker. And people wouldn't say Parker is the most devastating puncher in the heavyweight division. He couldn't put a dent in Joe Joyce. If Fury can't, how interesting does that fight become? Yeah, Fury is a lot quicker. But Joe Joyce is relentless, and he is heavy-handed. Fury can be hurt. Do you see that fight being an interesting one now? Or would you still just think that's a Fury win, probably points decision?
I think I would back Fury to win, but it'd be a difficult fight. I think the Fury of old would have won that quite comfortably. He would have just been too quick and his feet are too good. And I don't think he'd ever get put in a position where Joe Joyce is quick enough to catch him. Although Fury did sometimes get put down, sometimes get caught. It was by fighters that had a little bit of speed about him, and Joyce doesn't necessarily have that. The version of Fury now that does tend to stand his ground a little bit more. I still think he's got a speed advantage over Joyce. I also think he's great on the inside. He's very
Mm,
good at holding and fighting his way off it. He's obviously massive as well, which is something Joyce hasn't really had to contend with. He's fought fighters in and around his own size in Dubois, but in terms of someone that's bigger than him, Fury is naturally big. You know, there's no muscle there. He won't tire. He's got a great engine. He's got good powers of recovery. I just think over 12 rounds, Fury would have too much. And I also think one thing that benefits Fury massively is despite Dubois not being able to even rock Joe Joyce, Joseph Parker in the whole build up to the Joyce fight went, yeah, no one else hurt him, but I will. Now I'm with Andy Lee. I'll hurt him. You guys watch. And the second he couldn't hurt him, there was no
yeah.
backup plan for it. Whereas Tyson Fury, I think, would go in there with the mindset, okay, 12 round shutout, that would do me. Thank you very much. I'll box to that. I won't try and hurt him. And I think if you don't prepare to hurt Joe Joyce and you prepare to go 12 rounds, if you've got those advantages that Fury has, I think you can probably do enough to win a shutout.
You probably could. I would pick Fury, but I do think that Joe Joyce, he can be sneaky with that power sometimes as well. And
Yeah, definitely.
I just love to see Joe Joyce is one of those guys where you look at him, you just think you should not be as good as you are.
Yeah,
Like when you just see him, even against Parker, you're just like, Parker has all the ability, but yet Joe Joyce looked just battered him from pillar to post. It wasn't even
yeah,
close. So Joe Joyce would be an interesting one. Obviously, I want to see Undisputed.
yeah.
I really do. I really want to see Undisputed, and I just hope that it seems like every year now, even 2020, we at times it looked like we get it, and now it's just like every single year something else. The goalposts get moved again.
Yeah, it's the only fight at heavyweight that matters. Like,
Yeah,
regardless of how many fights we want to see, I actually think Joyce versus Wilder and Joshua versus Wilder are like fights where
brilliant
I could
fights.
I could just sit back and enjoy. I actually
Yeah,
think Wilder versus AJ is the biggest fight in the heavyweight division
yep.
commercially. But in terms of the fight that matters the most, in terms of the legacy and the history of that division, and ultimately what is riding on that fight could be the best heavyweight of this era. I think
Mm-hmm.
that fight has to happen. That's the one that needs to happen next year.
It 100% does. I mean, we've never had a four belt undisputed. It's been
Exactly.
1999 the last time we had undisputed, and all we want at this stage now is to just it's there,
Mm.
just get it over with. And I don't know. It just for me was interesting was seeing Fury trying to really go with Alexander Usyk after it, and Usyk just the eye just staring directly at him. And I just remember thinking, Fury is used to getting into these guys' head. And Fury, when he fought Klitschko, instantly he was able to just rattle Klitschko, get into his head. And I wonder, does he look at Usyk and think, you're no different. You're no different. He's completely different.
Yeah.
And could that actually come back to bite Fury? Because Usyk
Yeah.
seems to know the psychological game pretty well.
Yeah, there was nothing for Fury to overthink when it came to Klitschko and Wilder because he was in the heads. With Usyk, you get no reaction. Usyk doesn't speak the greatest of English, so when Fury is throwing around words like "dosser" and whatever, Usyk's English is so limited that he's probably only picking up on the basic of things. So he can just smile and laugh and look through him. I mean, the main thing for me was he didn't even blink. He just
Yeah.
he just kept his stare the whole time. I think he did that intentionally. Fury kept going on and getting louder and louder and more aggressive, and just wasn't getting a reaction. So that'll be the first time that Tyson Fury's staring into someone's eyes that's basically soulless. And I'm interested to see how he responds to it.
Don't get me wrong. Like, I know AJ Wilder is probably my favorite fight in the heavyweight division. But looking at a Fury Usyk stylistically, it's going to be a great fight if and when it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Just the
I think
speed
it
of
would
Usyk.
surprise people. I think it would
Mm.
surprise people how entertaining it would be as well.
I think it would be as well. It wouldn't be just one of these 12 round. He leads, he steps back. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of moments in that fight.
Hmm.
100%, a lot of moments.
Definitely.
But as we finished talking, we spent a half hour on this card. We got a good card this weekend to look forward to. Well, I say good card. We've got a good main event to look forward to.
Yep.
Luis Alberto, Josh Warrington. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't trust Josh Warrington to come through this.
Yeah, I can't
I don't
trust
trust him.
him. I don't trust him, but I also feel that he's probably in a better position. Um, Josh Warren's always performed well when he's not expected to do well. You know, whenever he's been an underdog against Frampton,
Lee
Selby,
Selby,
etc., he always performed well. When he's the favourite against Galahad, the favourite against Lara, you know, he's never performed particularly well. And I think the problem with Josh Warrington is before, when he was going to war with people, he was physically able to do it. I
yeah,
think the issue now may be that his body isn't prepared to go through war. He's had a lot of injuries, and that could be the issue. But it's still a winnable fight. People seem to sort of get it twisted a little bit when they talk about this. They just go, Lopez is going to walk through him like Lara did. I can guarantee you that won't happen. He won't
I,
just walk through him.
I
It's going
think
to be a
people,
war.
yeah, I think people look at the Lowe fight and say, look what he did to Isaac Lowe. But yeah, but he wasn't winning that fight. You know,
Yeah,
Isaac Lowe was beating him in that fight, and I don't rate Isaac Lowe at all. It was just that the sheer power and strength of Lopez was what got him through it. You know, so when people say, like, oh, look what he did to Isaac Lowe, it's like, well, hang on a sec. Like, you're just looking at the end of the fight where you got rid of Lowe at the time. He dropped him a couple of times. But Lowe was having success in that fight.
yeah. I was at that fight. I went to the York Hall, and like Lopez, basically, whenever he got close, was just far too much for Lowe.
Yeah.
But there were large parts of the fight where he was pretty dormant and he couldn't actually get near Lowe. Now, Warrington's 50 times the fighter. And also, just because he got knocked out by Lara, don't forget, Josh Warrington's got one of the best chins in boxing. He has a
Mm-hmm.
very, very good chin. He has a very, very good engine. Lara literally had to render him unconscious after 5 rounds before was when he actually made the breakthrough and badly hurt him. You know, Josh Warrington after that 4th round wasn't himself. He was concussed. And he
No.
was still taking big shots after big shots until that 9th round where it just got on top. Lopez isn't Lara. A lot of
No.
people, that's the thing that's annoyed me in this build-up is people have referred to him as Lara 2.0 and all this type of thing.
No.
He's completely different. He's a better boxer than Lara. He's got more ability, but Lara's just rugged. He hits hard and he's got a ridiculously good chin. And
Yeah.
the worst possible style for a feather-fisted volume puncher is someone like Lara. Against Lopez, he's going to have a great deal more success, and he's also going to defend himself a lot better against
Yeah.
Lopez.
And I think also the element of the unknown. I mean, Lara
Yeah.
went into that fight as a virtually unknown. So I'm sure Warrington probably looked at it and thought, yeah, he's got a few knockouts, but like, who is he beating? So I'm sure that's how he went into that fight. I'm sure with this one, he's like, I'm not taking this guy's like, look what happened last time.
Yeah, and the thing I made a point of in my prediction video is Josh Warrington. I remember the first time when we sort of saw him on our Sky Sports screens against Samir Manune for
I remember
the
that fight well. Was that European or
Commonwealth.
Commonwealth?
No, it's
Commonwealth.
Commonwealth. And when he went into that fight, he had no stoppages or KOs on his
Yeah.
record.
Was that
So
in the
you
12th
just
round?
yeah, you just assumed he weren't a puncher.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he started fighting on Sky, he started getting knockouts, and it built up to the point where he fought Carl Frampton, rocked him in the first round. Carl Frampton walked away and went, "That's the hardest I've ever been here." And I think Warrington went, oh, "Do you know what? I'm a power puncher now. I'm just going to start trading up with people, and I'm going to hurt them." You get in with someone that's got a good chin, and you put into perspective that, okay, people underestimated your power, Josh. You're getting in with people now that don't respect your power at all. You're going to run into some issues here. So he has to go back to what he used to do, which wasn't trying to knock people out. He was more relying on his speed and his volume. And if he relies on that, I think he can win this. Not comfortably, but I think he can win it easier than people expect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that Lara is always going to be a problem for him, but I
It's
don't
just a
think
bad style.
exactly. I don't think Luis Alberto will be. I don't trust him though.
Yeah.
You go through a fight like the first Lara fight because there's got to be some residual damage still, as well as injuries. You can't trust him to hold out, but if he does, he should win. He should win. Is there any other fights on that card you're looking forward to? Because I'm really kind of scratching my head like, what's really there?
No, it's an awful card. I actually think the Bridges versus O'Connell fight is a good enough fight. Like it's okay, but it's not enough to make me then want to tune into the rest of it. I
Who
know
do you have in
there's
that fight?
To be honest, Bridges really impressed me with her last performance because she got to the point where I just thought she was a bit of a novelty. I thought it was because people like to look at her. I thought it was because she's great on social media and she's done a fantastic job at building herself up. But then you actually saw the skills come out in her last performance. And I thought Mark Tibbs, who I'm not the most fond of as a trainer, but thought he's doing actually a really good job with her. So she surprised me a little bit. So I'm starting to find it harder and harder to go against Bridges when previously I was just sort of looking for an excuse to sort of back against her. So she's gained some confidence in me, I think. But The rest of the card, DAZN and Matchroom do this before the bell thing, and usually it's
Yeah,
3 or 4 fights. It generally looks like 90% of the card should be before the bell.
I seen that as well. Like I was like, this is crazy. Like this is their last British card of the year. And we
Yeah.
were talking about this before we went on. In terms of the big British cards, we haven't had one really proper memorable card this year. We've had memorable fights, like Lee Wood versus Mick Conlon, but in terms of the whole way through, we've not really had any memorable cards this year, have we? Now?
No, the British boxing has had good main events, but the cards have
Mm-hmm.
really suffered. I think a lot of it is because Frank Warren's had a really good comeback year, because Sky and Boxer have like infiltrated the market as well. Everyone's got this split of talent now, whereas before Eddie kind of had most of the names and was able to put on decent cards. He's lost a lot of those card fillers now that have gone over to Sky, and Sky don't quite have enough to build a good card. Frank doesn't have quite enough to build a good card, and they're all just sort of stuck in between at the minute. And I think that's why Eddie, I know in the UK, I don't think he's had a good year at all, but over in America, he's done a lot of quite good cards. And I think that's because over there, if you get an unknown Mexican against an unknown Mexican, you tend
Yeah,
to
you're
get a
gonna
bit
get
of a
good
war.
fights.
Whereas in the UK, if you get an unknown British fighter against another unknown Brit, more often than not, it can be a little bit boring or one of them
One
severely
sided.
outmatched. And so I think he knows what to do over there. But yeah, in the UK, I can think of good main events. I just can't think of good cards this year.
That's that's the bad part of it. Like, I mean, there's just it started out so good, but like now it's just like, what have we had this year in British boxing? We've great main events sometimes, but you don't talk about like where you could talk about like the undercard of say like Dylan White versus Joe Parker. I talk about some of the fights that were on that card, like Chisora versus Takam. We don't have anything like that now this year. It's been just such a bad year for British boxing in general. It's been horrible.
Yeah, it felt like when Eddie first came into the UK market and he started building up Matchroom and they were doing some good shows. Occasionally, when he had a really good prospect, he'd run with them as the front man. So
Mm-hmm.
Joshua, Luke Campbell, etc. He let them headline shows as basically novices because they were stars. They'd won gold medals, and he wanted to really promote them. It got to a stage though where he built up such a stable that those type of guys in the future, when he signed them, would perhaps go a little bit lower on a card, but they'd still be on there, and you'd be quite happy with the depth you were getting with a Saturday night fight. Now it's now got back to the stage where he's having to put those type of prospects at
Mm-hmm.
the top of cards again. I mean, Adam Azim, I know it was on a Sunday, great prospect, but that show had what, like 500 people there, and then
Yeah,
like
Ali Pali was dead.
it shouldn't be headlining a show. And like Pat McCormack being so high up as well, I know he wanted to give him a good chance, but back in like 2012, 2013, he probably would have been right towards the top of a card. The stables built up and then he would have been a little bit lower. And now because the stables are weaker again, they're getting back towards the top. And the amount of times I now just think I'll tune in at 10 o'clock to watch the main event and I'll catch the rest when I need to. Rather than before, it was kind of like, okay, I'll sit down 7 o'clock, the boxing's on,
Yeah.
that's me for the next 3 or 4 hours into Sunday morning or whatever. I rarely feel like that now. And I'm like, switch it on at 9, watch the 2 fights, and I'm good.
There's been a few times like that on Sky, VT, and the Zone. I've been like that. I've been like, do I really want to at 6 o'clock start watching? Because there's nothing that really perks my interest until kind of we get into the big hitters.
Mhm.
And I used to be a bit like, I was never like, I'd be like, as soon as fight night would be on, boom, done.
Mhm.
And just lock and load for the rest of the night. I think we're going to have a better year next year. I
Yeah.
do. It's harder to. This year was one of them years where for boxing, it's going to be hard to get worse, really, because it's like everything that could have happened didn't. And it was almost, and it wasn't just like they were miles away. A lot of them were close and they didn't, which is just so irritating, so frustrating.
Yeah, I think we got a bit of bad luck with a lot of fights this year. Like, it was supposed to almost be the year of the trilogies. You had Canelo
Mm.
versus Golovkin and Strider versus Chocolatito, and because they'd set such a high bar, neither of them fights delivered to the fight of the year standards like they had been previously. I think the biggest plus this year has been women's boxing in Taylor Serrano and Shields versus Marshall. They're both fight nights that I came away from and was like still buzzing the next day about them. So they're the ones that I think have had some real shine this year. Baumgardner versus Mayer, etc.
That was a great fight.
But everything else, and do you know what? It's a shame, really, because I thought the start of the year was kind of felt like we had a nice little run at the start of the year with Wood Conlon, even with the controversy of Taylor Catterall. It felt like boxing was being spoken about, and there was kind of everyone was talking to you about it. We're going into Fury versus White, obviously, Canelo Bivol. It
Mm-hmm.
felt like it was good at the start of the year, and then it just seemed to fizzle out over the summer months. And It's just everything after that, although there's been some great fights on paper, they've all under-delivered a little bit.
I think so. I think you're right. Like after kind of Canelo fought Bivol, that's when everything just seemed to stop.
Yeah.
It's like we were making good headway, and then it was just like, boom, it's done now.
Yeah.
In terms of next year, obviously actually that's a good question. That's a good one right there. Felix Cash fighting the guy he's not the co-main, but he's just below the co-main, who's 9-2-2. 9-2-2, really. And people wondered why he was looking to get out of his contract during the summer. I know he's got the Ammo Williams fight next year, which is a really, really good fight, but still, really.
I know what you mean.
In terms of actually fights, I seen Lawrence Okolie got ordered to defend his WBO title. The New Zealand guy whose name escapes me.
Yeah, Light.
How was it?
Light is surname. Light. Yeah.
The WBO sent the forms off, and they still have Eddie Hearn marked down as his promoter. Wonder what's going on there. I do think that Hearn is doing something that Bob Arum did it a lot, where it was just when a fighter wants to leave, just keep him inactive until you absolutely have to.
Yeah. And I don't blame him, to be honest.
No, neither do I. That's one of the few where I'm like perfectly with Eddie Hearn on this. He's done a great job.
Yeah. I think Okolie's been an idiot about the situation, to be honest. If he'd have kept his mouth shut, he'd have been in line to unify against Goulamirian. Goulamirian just needed to get that Igorov fight out of the way, and then it would have been him against Okolie. He's now blown all chances of that. And I was saying in my Discord server the other day, don't be surprised if when Okolie goes, Hearn goes and signs Goulamirian and gets Opataya out in Australia and starts to pick up cruiserweights to then block Lawrence Okolie, because that's the type of thing he does, and it wouldn't surprise me if he did it.
If Okolie wanted to get out of the contract so bad, and look, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but surely if he kept his mouth shut, he could have got out on the AJ Usyk undercard and then just said, thanks, Eddie, for everything, but I'm going over to Sky to give me a better offer, and that's it. No animosity, no issues. You got your last fight out of the way. See you later. Bye-bye. All's good. But instead, he's gone about it this way.
Exactly. He has one fight left. Just exercise that fight and get it out of the way. Like, I don't get why. And it could have been a unification. It wouldn't have just been a run-of-the-mill guy to get you out of your contract. Eddie was willing to give you a big fight because he thought you were staying on. And if you don't afterwards, then that is what it is. But yeah, Coley's handled the situation poorly.
He's handled the situation poorly, and he's going to be in a situation where he's going to go to Sky, and the best he can hope for is Richard Riakporhe.
Yeah.
That is literally it. So his move to Sky, I mean, they better be paying him some good money, because in terms of getting big fights, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, 100%.
It ain't going to happen. And after Eddie done a load for Okolie, I thought that was real bad for him.
Yeah, completely agree. I think me and you share the opinion on that I think Okolie's the one in the wrong in that situation.
100%. I mean, the guy bought you a Rolex, just dunked the place out twice in a year, and he still bigged you up and put you on all these cards.
Yeah,
that was Frank Warren. Now he'd have put you in there with someone dangerous, with the intention of have seen you get bet.
Bob Arum would have put him in with someone 10 times more dangerous just to watch him lose, so he didn't have to have him anymore.
It's crazy. It is crazy, that whole situation. In terms of going into the new year, we've got Boots Ennis announced back. I love Boots Ennis. Think he's great, but goddamn, he's fighting for the interim IBF. And here's the funny thing, right? The IBF, they stripped Joe Cordina of his title for a legit injury, right? And now Errol Spence has no injury. He's fighting Keith Thurman, and they're putting an interim title on the line.
Yeah.
I mean, make that make sense.
Yeah, they do it with loads of fighters where they don't have the same energy for others. For Errol Spence, I even think for MJ Akhmadliev as well, and who just keeps getting injured and keeps avoiding his IBF mandatory and delaying that division. Like, I mean, I can see why they've done the IBF interim for Boots Ennis, because that basically means that once Spence fights Thurman, he'll vacate, move up, and Boots will be elevated, and then Boots instantly has a champion. He's on the same network, and they can just run with him immediately from then on. But I just feel really sorry for him, to be honest, because I know that people want to see him in these fights, but really and truly, Boots Ennis is so good that unless he's in with Spence, Crawford, or Ortiz, you won't be happy.
Yeah.
And none of those fights can realistically happen because Spence and Crawford are holding the division hostage. I love Spence, I love Crawford, but the sooner they get out of that division, the better, because it's just holding everyone up.
And I think Boots Ennis is one of those special talents. Yeah. He's one of them special talents who goes under the radar. I'm sure if you said to the average fan, right, in the UK, who maybe would know a bit about boxing, Conor Benn versus Boots Ennis. Oh, Conor Benn easy. Even if he was clean easy, it's like, you know who Boots Ennis? Never heard of him. He can't be that good. It's like he would literally knock Conor Benn's head off his shoulders in the first round, clean
Yeah.
or juiced.
Yeah, I said it in the barbers once because I kept posting videos of Boots on my Instagram, and my barber said, "How do you think he'd get in against Conor Benn?" And I said, honestly, I'm not just saying this to diss Conor Benn or whatever people may think. He doesn't get out of 3 rounds against Boots Ennis. I'm
No.
sorry, he doesn't. Boots Ennis is one of the most special fighters I've ever seen. My Stephen Breadman Edwards, the Philadelphia trainer, always says he's got Roy Jones' athleticism and Mark Two Shot Johnson's ability, and I love that idea because he's just versatile but with freakish athleticism. He's special as they get.
He is, and I can't wait to see when he does finally pick up his world title and he does finally start kind of going through the division, just how good he's going to be. Just like how many divisions he can go through, because he has the frame. He can go up to 160 easy. And just
Easy.
he would still be, he'd be there. He wouldn't need any tune-up fights. He would just go straight, boom, there, I got it.
Yeah, 100%.
He is legit. In terms of the pay-per-views, though, we've got coming up here in the UK. Just from the rumours I'm hearing, it's looking to be it's a bit ambitious. So we've got Eubank Smith pay-per-view. I like the fight, but pay-per-view. Then we might potentially have Taylor Cattrall rematch pay-per-view. I'm thinking that's reaching a bit. 2 pay-per-views in 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, I heard today that Taylor versus Cattrall is being pushed back. They're
Again?
not going to they're not going to put it as soon because they're obviously conscious of running pay-per-views that close together. For me, neither of those fights warrant pay-per-view. But I can ultimately see from a business point of view why you would. Obviously, Chris Eubank is a big name and has obviously been in the headlines for the best part of 6 months now and has grown a lot in popularity. So I can understand that. I know they wanted to do it for the Liam Williams fight, but didn't feel it was right. So I can understand now why they've made that jump. Taylor versus Cattrall, I think just as a fight on paper, isn't good enough to be pay-per-view. But again, because of the circumstance, and I think everyone was a little bit surprised with how much coverage Taylor Cattrall got the first time round. I think my live show was still the most viewed video on my channel, so it did get a lot of traction. So I can see why they're pay-per-view from a business point of view, but boxing in this country, you're sticking everything on pay-per-view. You're making all these arena shows way too expensive for tickets as well. It's no wonder that none of these shows are selling out anymore.
I mean, you going, as you said, look at Alexandra Palace. That's not a big arena. And it looked like you could play football in certain parts of it.
Yeah.
That's literally what it looked like. It's crazy. Do you think it's just the fact that the fighters are just demanding too much money? Or what is it? Or do the promoters know that they're likely to take a loss in the shows because there's good fighters but no real stars?
Yeah, it's paying the fighters as well. I've said it for years when people kept asking me, how is Dereck Chisora still on pay-per-view? Because he gets paid over $1 million for every single fight. When people were talking about Joyce and Parker, whether that should be pay-per-view or not, again, they're getting paid millions. You can't afford to pay fighters millions if you're not going to put it on pay-per-view because it's not going to generate that on the gate, a lot of those fights. Some of them will, your Furies, your Joshuas, etc. They will just generate that, that's fine. But for a lot of these fights that are just a good competitive domestic fight, they're not generating that much money, but the promoters have to pay them somehow. And there almost does need to be this sort of reset. And during COVID, Eddie Hearn said that, this will reset fighters' purses because they'll be more grateful for the purses that they're getting and the opportunities they're getting. It didn't change it at all. They may have got paid less for fight camp. Everything after that, it just went straight back to normal. So, yeah.
It did, and I remember thinking that as well because it was behind closed doors. A lot of the events, I was like, "Oh yeah, they'll have to get used to taking less." And that lasted for all of fight camp, and then it was just back to basics. There you go. Yep, same as always.
Exactly.
It's absolutely crazy in terms of because we're coming near the end of this. In terms of 2022, because I know we still have a few fights left this year. Manuel Charles, Lucas Brown. Just to name a few. Looking forward to that one. Yep. Yeah, I guarantee you Dubois will face the winner. They'll probably sell that as an eliminator. They probably will and all, actually. Wouldn't shock me if they did, actually, to be fair. But jokes aside, what is your kind of highlight of the year boxing-wise this year?
I think for me, there's kind of like two. So the main one for me would be what Ken Shiro's done.
Oh yeah, and the
Because,
comeback he's come back from the loss last year. Remember that?
well, he is just it disappoints me that he won't sweep most of the awards at the end of year awards for most people, but he should be fighter of the year. He should have performance of the year. He should have round of the year. He should have comeback of the year. Like what he's achieved this year is just incredible. And he ultimately hasn't got the coverage that he really deserves.
No,
But
tremendous fighter.
he's been the standout fighter of this year alongside Dimitri Bivol, and another man who was going to be my other highlight in Bam Rodriguez is a guy that I've really bigged up for the best part of 5 years now. I mentioned in the amateurs he had a bit of a rivalry with Ryan Garcia's brother Sean, so I knew him from around that time. And when he turned pro, I really rated him highly. Wasn't getting spoken about much on top ranked shows. Ended up getting onto the zone, got thrown in early at the deep end, and he swam like a shark. So seeing him just really, take that next step at such a young age has been one of my highlights as well.
It's been incredible seeing him, and the fact that he has the work rate he does. I'm not talking about in the ring, just in terms of staying in shape, getting these fights gone into 112 now. As much as I think Sonny Edwards beats Martinez, he ain't beating Bam Rodriguez.
Yeah, I don't
No
think
way.
so. It's a good
Uh,
fight. Sonny's good enough to compete with anyone, but I do think Bam's just got some of the things that Sonny has that a lot of fighters when they face Sonny, they're completely different styles. Bam has a lot of Sonny's best assets and does them
yeah,
to a similar standard, and I think that sort of that closes the gap.
I can't. He is the fighter I'm probably looking forward to most next year to see what he does,
Yeah,
because
he's gonna have a big year.
there's so much we can do with him. I think I would say the same in terms of my kind of standards of the year. It would be probably Bam Rodriguez, just seeing where and what he's done. Quadras, Rumfasai, Gonzalez, Israel Gonzalez. I mean, they are all, none of them fights are easy. I would say Quadras is probably the easiest out of them all because I thought he was on the slide the most. But mate, you came from 108 to beat the three of them. I mean,
Yeah.
in a year, that's crazy.
Yeah, and Rungvisai is that fight for me is kind of the runner-up for performance of the year as well. So Bam needs to be in those types of conversations. Bivol as well has obviously done great things as well.
Yeah,
But yeah, for me, Ken Shara above everything.
Ken Shiro has been. I used to always call him Shiro. I think that's how I heard his name mentioned. It always stuck with me. He is a fantastic fighter as well. I remember Sonny Edwards saying he could go down to 108 and fight him. I don't see how he could get down to 108, but if he did, I wouldn't be holding my breath against Ken Shiro. Put it like that.
I think Sonny would be very, very drained at 108.
Mm,
He's never exactly ripped even at 112. I think getting down to 108 would deplete him a little bit.
I think it would absolutely kill him. Like that's at that weight to lose, was it 4 pounds? That would be too much. At that weight, you just can't mess around with that.
Yeah,
The last thing I want to talk about before we finish an amateur, it was Moses Atue. I think
yeah,
I'm saying that name right. I only recently started watching him. I think we talked about this before, where I said that he is one of the most special amateurs I've seen in a long, long time, especially for a heavyweight. I think he is absolutely fantastic. And going into next year, obviously, I don't know if he'll get to the Olympics. I think I think they're looking at, what's the other guy's name? Delicious.
delicious
They're looking
Ori.
at
Yeah.
him. But he is someone who I think a lot of fans don't know about. And I'm trying to make people aware of him. I know you know a bit about him. We got to talk about him a little bit.
Yeah, I made quite a bold statement. That for me at youth level, I've never seen a British amateur that good at youth level. Been following British amateur boxing for a long while now, and I actually pay more attention probably to the youth tournaments than I do to a lot of the senior ones as well, because I like sort of trying to pick up on those talents early. As I mentioned with a lot of the US tournaments that I've seen in the past, where you get to see a Shakur, a Boots, a Bam way before they ever go on to do anything. So I always pay attention to youth level. And if Moses Satoma was Cuban or Ukrainian or Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or something like that, I think everyone would be screaming about him because he's British. I think people are a little bit more reserved, but he is incredibly, incredibly talented. And I don't think he'll get to go to Paris because Delicious Ori, fair play to him, whilst I think Atoma's got way more upside. Delicious Ori's actually been the star performer, really, of this
Mm.
current British GB team. So you can't take that away from him, unfortunately. But there has been rumours, and it's been rumoured a couple of times now, that Ori has considered signing with Sky. So it will be interesting to see if maybe he does just eventually take that jump with amateur boxing really having no future. But we'll wait and see. But Enrico and Tormo is going to be very, very, very special.
He looks it. The first clip I seen of him was when he fought that Bulgarian and he knocked him out in a round. And I was looking at this guy thinking, holy shit. It's very rare. When you see someone and you get the eye test, they always look good. But this guy you could tell the talent, the speed, 6'5", 17. I was like, he's going to be a problem. He is going to be, give him a few years. He is going to be a massive problem. He already is now, but when he gets his man strength, it's going to be fun to see him go through the years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited to see him kick on now because in amateur boxing, like you see the odd knockout, he knocks everyone out, which is just it's a statement.
When he won the Youth Worlds, wasn't it? Every fight was a knockout win. You just don't see that. For a 17-year-old as well.
Blowing through them all.
I think we got good. So we're nearly the hour mark. So I think we're going to call that there before StreamYard boots one of us, because it's probably going to do that now in a sec. So before we finish up, one last time, Jamie, Punch Perfect, I'll let you do the outro, plug the channel, and say what you got to say.
Firstly, thank you for having me on, mate. I've seen loads of messages in the chat as well. Big enough.
I couldn't read them.
Thank you to everyone that's popped up as well. My name's Jamie, Punch Perfect Boxing. If you want to hear me salivate more over Ken Shiro and boxers over Japan and in the amateur scene as well, come over as I'll try and shed some light on the areas that doesn't get enough coverage, in my opinion.
I know you think Paul Butler versus Inoue is very competitive. One fight you want people to know about. Easy prediction. 25-minute video, can't split them.
I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make that last more than 4 minutes.
No, mate, I appreciate you having you on. Hopefully, we could do something on yours before the end of the year. That's what someone says there. Punch Perfect, Gman, great combo. There you go. Always.
Absolutely.
People, I'm going to leave it here before StreamYard boots one of us. So, been a pleasure having you all on. 140 is in the build. Smash the like button on the way out, please. Haven't asked anyone to do that tonight yet, so please do on the way out. People will talk to you. Peace. So, mate, that was good.